Hello and welcome to episode 11 of Cool Tunes for Hot Planet. This is the first of our mid-month episodes, Global Notes, featuring interviews and profiles of people who are working at the intersection of art and activism and finding ways to redefine our relationship as artists in the midst of the climate struggle. I'm Warren Senders. Thank you so much for listening. Anyone who's put any energy at all into the climate movement knows just how difficult it is to bring the issue up in conversation with people who haven't experienced the emergency for themselves on a visceral level. In my own daily climate vigils, one of the signs that I hold up reads, 1. Change our conversation. 2. Change our consumption. 3. Change our politics. As musicians, we may be able to influence our listeners to change their buying habits. We may even be able to influence them to think differently about who they choose when they're in the voting booth or filling out their ballots. But perhaps more than anything else, we as musicians have the power to change how our listeners think about the climate crisis and how they talk about it. Some people write songs about climate and environmental issues, and we've highlighted many of them on Cool Tunes for a Hot Planet, and we'll continue to do that. But not everybody has a creative impulse that runs in that direction. And so part of our work is to introduce you to musicians and performers who are finding new ways to reshape the climate conversation with their art. Composer, pianist, and climate activist Lola Perrin began bringing her listeners into the dialogue by incorporating climate-themed discussions into her concert programming, with time in the concert set aside to confront and talk about climate change. In subsequent work, she's gone a step further and incorporated the voices and thoughts of audience members in her compositions, creating pieces that reshape the boundaries between concert music and climate activism in fascinating and provocative ways. I first interviewed Lola in 2021 as part of a series of climate-themed music and performance videos put on by Music for Climate Justice, aka M4CJ. Lola was living in the UK at the time. She's now living in France, and we recorded a Zoom session where she shared the work of her Climate Keys project and played some beautiful clips from some of her piano concerts and events. I got permission from my friends at M4CJ to re-release this interview because Lola's work is even more important and relevant to the discussion now. I'm sure you'll enjoy meeting Lola Perrin, hearing her remarkable music, and learning about the ways she's integrated her activism into her art. I'm Warren Senders, and this is Cool Tunes for Hot Planet.
2016, there was almost nowhere to go and talk about climate change, global warming, whatever we were calling it in those days. You know, I was going about my ordinary life. I was aware that the planet was in terrible trouble. I didn't understand the science. I tried very hard. In those days, it was very difficult. The materials were not available to non-scientists in a way that I could absorb. So I just came to the conclusion that I had to transform my own space into an arena for discussion. My own space happened to be the concert venue. So I wrote my 9th piano suite by that time, and in that suite I put a 40-minute silence. So there would be music before and music after this silence. And the silence was going to be filled with a short talk by any expert I could find who would explain what on earth was going on, and followed by a longer audience discussion. So the speaker would transform into a facilitator to enable the audience to form some kind of community, if only for the duration of the concert. So we could genuinely try to work out amongst ourselves what this is, what can we do about it?
You sent me 5 clips. One of them is labeled "Play Piano for the Planet."
And then I thought, well, I don't want it to be like a street piano project where you just walk up to any old street piano and play. You know, I need it to be really different. So in the end, we got a grand piano, and it was hard to do this. We organised it so we got it over the police lines. We got it in place just behind a roadblock. And I had reached out along with other people who were working with me, and together we got 32 or 34 concert pianists to play in a non-stop 6-hour marathon. So everybody had their allocated time. And I asked everybody to dress up as if they're going to play at Carnegie Hall, because Carnegie Hall is going to be flooded. What is the point of these young people learning to be concert pianists with the dream of playing at Carnegie Hall when it's going to be flooded? New York's a floodplain, you know. So, well, it will be, unfortunately, and every capital city in the world is going to flood. So we're living in some kind of a fantasy. These poor young pianists who are so talented, where are they going to be playing? So it was amazing because they all turned up in their gowns and their tuxedos and did amazing, you know, performances out in the cold. So Play Piano for the Planet was the name. We had pedal power amplification. So we had people volunteering to cycle for, you know, there were 4 bikes in a row. It was all very colourful, so there was no electricity involved. And it got news around the world because it's so visual, you know. And this is the whole point was to get media coverage. Like, why are all these concert pianists doing this in a roadblock? Ah, climate change, right? Puts the words climate change into the media.
Lovely.
The other films, do you want me to tell you about the other films?
Yes, these are labeled Significantes Amsterdam Parts 1, 2, 7, 9. Tell me a little bit about those.
So, when I decided to write my ninth piano suite, I reached out to three people who I had encountered through science meetings, and I asked permission to use quotes that I'd got from them. And these three sources, they're all science researchers or academics. And I allowed the three sources of quotes to drive forward the sense of the composition and to create the music, because I like to work from triggers. I always work from triggers. So I was working from sort of, concepts of or analyses of climate change and about our significance on the planet. So I came to the title Significantes. It's a construct of significance and cantus, to bring people together to talk. The first piece is a quote from Chris Rapley, who basically, if you can imagine, you are billions of light years away from this planet, you are another race, another civilization, you're looking through your telescope and you can hear through the telescope, you might hear this piece that I've written, I hope. It's the sound of the planet moving through, our planet moving through the skies as if maybe no one's left, the crew's gone. Because we have tampered with the air. I mean, who could tamper with the air? With all the systems designed to keep us alive, if we really were a spacecraft. The seventh piece is a quote from Chris Rapley again. We are playing with fire. This is a very dangerous thing to do, to carry on. Just to carry on. We are literally playing. This is in 2016. Of course, Greta Thunberg, our house is on fire. So this piece I wrote was about, it's a very, very strong, very short, fiery piece of music, incredibly fast piece of music. All at the bottom of the piano. My favourite keys are at the bottom of the piano. There aren't enough people writing for those keys, so I try and write for them a lot. And after that piece, in my piano suite, I get this, and then the speaker has to stand up and talk right after that piece. So it's designed to give agency to the room, to the discussion. And then the final piece I sent you, that is performed after the audience conversation, after which we've all discussed together how we can act on climate change. The final piece is called Imagine Better, Create, for all of us, because we're just limited by our imagination, as we all know. I'm not saying something we don't know already.
So, Lola, here it is. It's been 4 years since we had our conversation in 2021. And tell us a little bit about what you're doing and what you're thinking.
So my latest composition is called Solo Punk Symphony, music from the errata scene for 4 pianos and citizen voices. So I wanted to rename the Anthropocene because it's kind of fun. So I came up with the word errata scene because the impacts are erratic.
The audience is seated. The room is filled with the sound of chatter. The lighting changes and attention shifts to the dramatic presence of 4 pianos. Although the audience is now hushed, there is conversation somewhere. 4 people in the audience are intimately discussing climate news they've been looking up on their phones. They're the performers, who now make their way to the pianos, continuing to exchange stories. When seated, they put their heads in their hands. The room is entirely silent for the first time. It's a moment to consider the reality of the news. musicians move back towards the audience and they read from interviews with farmers and others about the ecological changes they've been seeing.
Fires intensified by both the climate crisis and a criminal assault on the rainforest. For weeks now, forests and farmers here in the Amazon have been ablaze like seldom before, affecting nearly 60% of the country.
And as you may have noticed, we have a representation of our sleeping institutions here. Who is this figure sleeping? It is our Tsar of Collapse who is asleep. And we're going to give you some pieces of...
The audience is asked 5 questions. Where are we going? What do we really want? What do we need to let go of? What can we bring back to help us? When people are listening, what will you say? The answers are collected up and then audience volunteers come forward to read the answers aloud to the sleeping Tsar of Collapse in an attempt to rouse it. When the music is over, the pianists pick up their phones, resume searches for climate news, and converse with each other as they leave the stage. The piece has no ending, just as it had no beginning. The climate story is just that, a continuation in which our engagement also needs to be continuous.
So that's my idea. And I gave it one performance in Norway, in Bergen, at a residency. I had the Greek Academy of Music, and I'm now working on how to create an ensemble where I can travel maybe around in Europe in some way to perform this.
It sounds like a way of transforming people's relationship with the climate discussion. It has tended to be very hard to talk about climate change with people who aren't already part of the activist group. But what you have here is, I think, a model for creating a discussion that, because it's part of a cultural presentation, there's a different set of ground rules and a different set of behaviors that are expected of us. And I think it's a big part of what we have to do in order to move forward and find ways to live in this new reality of ours, is change our conversation, change the way that we talk to one another about it.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And I think ritual is very important. And what happens in this piece is the audience takes part in ritual.
So, Lola, how can people find out more about who you are and what you're doing?
Well, you could go to my website, which is lolaperrin.com. And on the front page, I have now dedicated it to Solar Punk Symphony. And I've put links to 2 articles I've just had published in Climate Cultures about this project.
Well, we are looking forward to hearing more about what you come up with and what you imagine. I understand you'll be focusing on work in community centers, community cultural centers, and clearly that's a big part of what we have to do going forward. The way that we survive this is by reimagining what it means to be in a community.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Really important to find as many ways as we can within the community to connect with each other. And as musicians, we may as well find musical ways to do that.
Thank you for joining us on Cool Tunes for a Hot Planet. I'm Warren Senders. We'll look forward to seeing you for our next episode coming up at the beginning of April. Bye.